Every live stream. This takes forever. I'm glad I know this takes forever now. We'll get started here shortly. Give us just a moment.
Welcome to the show where high achieving women ditch the stress without losing the success. I'm Janessa Finley Ford. I'm a coach, healer, and fierce advocate for mastering the art of being human. Because you weren't born to burn out, you were born to rise. And this is where science meets spirit and ambition becomes alignment. And I don't do this alone, so let's meet the other voice behind the mission.
And I'm SJ. I'm a certified crystal healer and shamanic earth and energy medicine practitioner. I blend science, spirit, and strategy together to rewire your energetic patterns for peace, potency, and purpose.
So today's episode is conflict, the advanced leadership skill. I have to be honest, as I sit here and think about conflict, I get a knot in my stomach. And for SJ, super opposite response. But I have to be honest also that for me, conflict it really only feels like conflict when one person isn't actually there for motion, just there for the antagonizing and the discord. That's what gets me a pit in my stomach. So let's get into what today's episode is going to be about. And it's that actually you don't usually struggle with communication as much as what you think you do. You struggle with what happens inside before you speak. So the tightening in your chest when the tension enters the room, or the instant calculation of how this could go wrong, the urge to smooth, to fix, to delay, to intellectualize, to quietly disappear, or maybe just to spit utter brash truth, unaware of the impact it might have on others. And then later, are you replaying conversations in the shower? Those conversations you have with someone who isn't even there, or reflecting on how polite words somehow create a distance instead of the clarity you were intending. What's fascinating is we tend to treat these as personality habits or communication styles or relationship problems when they're an expression of something unseen shaping in the scene. So there's an internal field, emotional, energetic, perceptual, that organizes behavior long before words ever form. Because feelings move faster than logic, power dynamics get sensed before they're actually understood, and your body makes relational decisions the mind later has to explain. So today we are going to talk about conflict, but not the surface version. We're going to explore it as a leadership capacity. Because if you avoid, avoidance creates behaviors. If you're indirect, indirectness creates stories. Unspoken desires turn into complaints. And then there's also gossip, which often becomes the pressure valve for power that we don't know how to hold cleanly. So the moment that you can stay present while tension exists, you stop managing people and you start relating to them. And that shift lives in the invisible before it ever shows up in the conversation in the physical. And that's what we're getting in here today. So let's open our eyes a little bit wider to what conflict is all about. To get us started with a story, I feel like this is the best story for this conversation. A friend of mine and her daughter drove over to my house yesterday. The daughter is practicing driving so she can get her driver's license and pass the test. And we'll just say the daughter's name is Anne. So Anne was sitting and discussing the experience of learning to drive, to have a learner's permit, to be driving with a parent all the time, and the experience of driving, particularly with one of the parents who likes to tell her to look in front of you, look behind you, pay attention to the vehicle beside you. How fast are you going, right? Like all these things that we have to learn to take in informationally when we're driving. And it creates a little bit of conflict between them. And so I was kind of being facetious about it. And I'm like, well, think about it, Anne. It's kind of like when you were, 2 or 3. And when we learn new things, we have to be really conscious about it before we can be unconscious. Because here was the source of the conflict. The conflict is that everything that this parent tells Anne to do when she's driving or to not do, they do the opposite of when they're driving. So there's incongruency, right? Like they're telling her how to drive, but then they don't do the same thing. So I'm like, it's just like when you were 3 and you were learning to potty train. You have to get really conscious, right? Like we were always checking in. Do you have to go to the bathroom? Do you have to go to the bathroom now? What about now? Maybe we should get up. Let's get up. Let's walk to the bathroom. Here, hold my hand. We're going to get on the potty. Like it has to be so conscious. And then you get rewarded for it. Like, great job. Here's the M&M. Here's the sticker to put on your chart. Yay, let's celebrate. And like, don't worry, it's not going to be, it's not going to last that long, first of all. And it's not going to be that dramatic. It's just a matter of learning in the conscious all the things that you have to do when you're driving so that you can get beyond the point of like, how awkward would it be today, Anne, at 15 to be, do you have to go to the bathroom? Do you have to go to the bathroom now? Should we walk to the bathroom? Here, hold my hand. Let's go to the bathroom. So anyway, I don't know if it fully landed for her as far as alleviating the conflict or the misalignment, but it gave her a good laugh. And she definitely got the other point of when you're learning, you do have to be more consciously engaged than letting the subconscious run the show. So that's my cute little story. There was something else that happened at the ending, but it's not coming to me. So I guess it's not meant for our story here on Eyes Wide Open. So to get us into our topic of conflict, I'm just going to toss it over to SJ and she's going to launch us into this topic.
Yeah, I want to look at this also from the universal law that we're talking about this month in Stronger Together, which is the universal law of oneness. And I think as we start looking at conflict through the universal law of oneness, we're going to discover that conflict is typically never personal to start. It can get there for sure, but it doesn't start at that place. That universal law of oneness says that we're all connected, everything is related, like we have the one consciousness, we can tap into each other's energetics, our thoughts, our feelings, all of that. But here's the thing that I want to really drive home today of the universal law of oneness and conflict. The law of oneness does not mean that we're always going to agree, that everything is always going to be harmonious, everyone's going to understand each other, they're going to be vibing. It also does not mean that we get to bypass tension and label it peace when it's likely still conflict, just avoidance of it, and actually missing the directness that can come from a disagreement that doesn't have to turn into a nasty argument. I'm not saying that. Conflict doesn't mean an argument, it means a discrepancy in the way we are perceiving what is happening. The law of oneness just means that none of this is happening in isolation. This is moving through our energy field, it's moving through the other person's energy field. Likely, it's moving through your entire team dynamics energy field because energy is always going to be felt first. Every single interaction that you have happens inside of a shared field. That's the really important part of the law of oneness, that every emotion moves through that same field, and every unspoken reaction is going to leave a trace on the energy within that room, within that relationship as well. So when conflict shows up, it's not proof that someone has failed or someone is right or someone else is wrong. It's none of that, right? It doesn't mean that somebody was right and somebody was wrong and that we're arguing our points to be right. That's not what we're talking about when we're talking about conflict. Conflict is proof that something moved and wasn't actually able to be spoken, digested, metabolized, transmitted, transmuted, all of those fancy cliche words. It just means that you couldn't process entirely what was happening from that emotional body into the logical and the physical body as well. And I think this is where most leaders can miss the point. They can treat conflict as a behavior problem or a personality issue or a person problem. Like it's the other person's behavior or just them as a human is the problem. When it's actually just an energetic field event, it's nothing more. Just means that something happened within that auric field for you and that other person that has a different vibration, has a different resonance. It could have had a different intent from that person. However, your perception changed the intent to fit your rhetoric based off of the emotional response that you had that maybe you didn't even pick up on or log or I'm a head point, right? Or think about. Like I didn't think about the fact that my emotional body was triggered first. So then when I don't recognize that, I instantly go into rationalizing in my mind the intent without actually being open to have the conversation of what is the goal of this conversation or what was your intent with bringing this to me? Like, what were we looking to do with this info? Is this info coming to me because you felt a certain sort of way about something that I did? Like, let's talk about the real thing and not try to make up in my mind a factual or logical reason to support what I am interpreting to be the reason, right? Like, I may be interpreting that you decided to attack me, so therefore you want to fight. That's probably not actually true. That may not actually be what the person brought up, the subject that is triggering me, which is the core that the focus has to be on. I need to feel and understand internally what's going on with me right now in this moment, because it's actually not about them. It's not about the other person. It's not about the topic that we're talking about. Something internally is happening in my emotional body that I need to actually look at because that is my responsibility to take a look at my emotions and my feelings before I project that outward onto someone else. So, really looking at things like what tension do I sense, but I've avoided talking about it or naming it. Like maybe I feel like someone is in direct competition with me or is threatening my position, but I'm not having that conversation with myself first about why do I feel this way? Are there even factual basis to support that thought and that feeling? And I'm also likely not talking to the other individual when we get into those heavier topics. And also for me, really slowing down my thoughts is the most important thing for me and likely all head points. And leaning into that, what do I feel right now before I open my mouth and word vomit all of the thoughts over the other individual. So if you're an Enneagram 7, this one is really going to hit home for you. Stop the mouth vomit and wait. Pause and tap into what do I feel? And that probably sounds really gross to most Enneagram 7s as I say that. So let's start small. Does your collarbone feel tingly? Let's just start with that. Like I have a tingle in my collarbone. What is happening with that collarbone? Before you decide what you're going to say, just to slow down those thoughts and the projection. Because as 7s, we're really good at projecting blame to anything. Like, if you tell us that I want you to just fight about this, no problem. Doesn't matter what this is. Like, it could be anything. That this thing behind me, this plant, is purple. And I would argue how there's definitely purple within that plant. So it's clearly purple. So slowing down is the point that I really want to hit for all Enneatypes. Just slow down and check in with that emotional body of what do I feel right now? What is going on before I decide to project reasoning or facts onto the topic when maybe there isn't any.
We have studied the Enneagram and different people's experience of being human for a long time, and it is so wild to me still. Like it's fascinating. You need a freaking pit in your stomach. That's what you need. Because I'm sitting over here and I'm like, I don't know how you can not feel into your body
You got nothing.
because it's undeniable, but it's not the frame of reference. So on the flip side of what SJ shared, I believe that there's a conversation around conflict feeling very personal for those of us who are softer. Um, I don't know the right word for this. It's not necessarily
More connected to
more
their
connected.
emotional
Yeah.
body. Like you are just far superior in your connection to your emotional body.
This is connection is actually the theme that we're talking about, not in that way. So yes, that is, of course, connection to the emotional body. But I have, and it's still a work for me in progress to not take conflict personally. And these feelings that we have that move faster than logic when you are a feeler and you're so in tune and connected to the emotional body, you feel it instantly, even before you can formulate and think through how you're going to respond.
Mhm.
So there's just an overwhelming amount of emotion or sensation in the body. And the conflict isn't necessarily about the disagreement for a feeler. From my standpoint and what I've researched about people's perspectives, it is about the perceived instability and connection with someone else. So this is going to land, especially for Enneagram 9s, Enneagram 1, I would say even Enneagram 2, 4, 6, potentially,
Mhm.
where when that connection feels like it's wavering or broken, that it's ruptured, that's when they'll turn inward to take the conflict personally, as though they've caused it or whatever meaning they make about it. And of course, we can make lots of different meanings about it, but that starts that taking things personally spiral, if you will. And there's a whole lot of things that happen before the words in a conflict exist. You know, the body will instantly predict the outcome based upon outcomes from previous conflicts. That's going to trigger the identity. So, for instance, if your identity is that you are a peacekeeper or you're a peaceful person, then your identity is going to start operating. And then what follows at the end is the behavior, which, if you're on this peace thread of connectedness, the behavior might look like avoiding conflict or brushing it off or passively placating, like not placating where someone is really irritated and know that you're deliberately doing it, but just making it okay so that you can return to a place of stability of connection with the person. So, so often when you look at it from this lens, you'll see how the conflict doesn't often begin when the talking begins. There's a whole succession of events that have happened in your internal world before you even got to that point. And the real trigger is when your safety feels uncertain,
Mhm.
then the conflict already seems super real. But this also, and I feel like we've talked about some of these in previous episodes on conflict, like over a year ago. Tone for sure is real. And the tone, we will sense tone before we sense the meaning that the person holds or the intention that they hold. Because tone can come from a whole lot of places that isn't being frustrated with you personally. Like if you're taking it personally, that's how it might be interpreted, but that doesn't actually mean that's where the tone is originating from.
Mhm.
Your body reacts also before interpretation of the words. So those inner programming of what's happened in previous conflicts are going to start registering in your body. And then your logic will just try to justify a decision that's actually already been made emotionally because you're working to return to that place of safety so that you don't have to bear the weight of this conflict that you're taking personally, either meaning something about you or carrying the blame for it. So you can see as we walk through this succession of inner events that can play out for some of us during conflict, why calm voices can actually be avoidant and loud voices can be honest. And so even volume isn't necessarily an indicator of what we might think it would be. And I've had some up close and personal interactions with this with some individuals in my life who have had brain injuries or medical diagnoses where their pronunciation has changed for them to be able to speak. And that often comes with more force in their words to be able to get it out clearly. And for a lot of people, if you heard that, you would think that they are upset or there's some sort of something not okay with them from an emotional standpoint when it's actually the physical. So, as SJ said, slowing down, I too am just offering a few more reasons in an invitation to slow down when we want to speed up because we want to get back to that place of safety and connection. So everything programmed within us is going to want to go faster, go quickly, respond quickly, make it okay quickly. And really, your power is in the pause, and it is in slowing down. Maybe take a breath or two before you speak and respond. Ajay, what do you think that most people are reacting to? What's being said or what their body believes is about to happen, or something else within the conflict? Is there anything else that you see from your experience in what I've just walked through here that would play in the dynamic of people's response being on autopilot?
Yeah, I would say the one thing that is most overlooked is that we all bring and assign intent to every relationship. So if you have some relationships that are super easy, like you know that person has the best intentions for you show up in conflict very differently than you do with people that you have assigned intent to their being, you've assigned worth to them, and when I say worth, you've assigned how much they value you as well, because that's a mirror, right? So maybe you don't think they're worth your time, but that likely could be because they've also made you feel like you were not worth their time as well. So like there's always a mirror to that aspect. But the thing that I see most is that we like to avoid or not talk about the fact that if there's a disharmonious relationship, it's likely not the conversations we've had, it's the assigning of intent. So then we show up to new conversations with that same vibration of malice or malintent when we interact with those people. And that's when we find ourselves, when asked by leadership or other individuals on the team, well, what happened? Why did that go so poorly? What are the factual items that happened? And then you start playing the conversation in your head and you're like, huh, when I think about the words that occurred, I can't find a factual reason that this conflict went poorly or that this conversation triggered me in a way. And that's because we've avoided the conversations early on about, I think you want bad things for me. I don't think you want to see me succeed. I don't think that you perceive me in a good light, which, right? It's a mirror. So all of those things that we're assigning to the other person is true for us as well. We probably don't necessarily want them to get rewarded for their our perception, bad behavior, their bad work, their lack of initiative, their lack of intake, but it's always the intent that we have assigned to that person that determines whether conflict is going to be able to be resolved harmoniously or if the conflict is going to degrade the relationship further. And I'm sure we all have those relationships where we can look and say, like, man, I don't know why that person has such a hard time with other people because they're super easy. They're easy to work with. They are super high vibrational, like they have their shit together. Well, they do in your relationship, right? Because both of you hold the same vibration, the same intent for each other. Like, I know you want good for me. So, therefore, when you're upset about something, I want to hear it. I want to hear it because I want to truly resolve it. So, as leadership, we like to lie to ourselves a lot and say, oh, I want to resolve everything. I want to resolve every conflict. I want to resolve every personality or personnel problem. No, you don't. No, you don't. Because if you did, you would identify your own malintent for that person and you would do the inner work to clean that up so that you can at least show up in clean energy whenever that person comes to you to then decide based off of facts and not perception. Is this conversation something that is of value that I should push forward? Or can I explain to this individual why that isn't an option I can explore in a honest but also non-confrontational way? Because confrontation is a very different vibration than conflict. They're very different, even though they're very close with their letters.
This is so true. I actually thought you were going to take this conversation a little bit different direction when you talked about not wanting to resolve all conflict. So I was just processing as I was listening to how you were actually moving into that dynamic. One of the things that I have found with conflict, and it was definitely a growth edge for me, being empathic as well as wanting to walk away from conflict in peace, truly, by the end of it, which is often outside of my control. But I would relate for someone rather than relating to them. And so when they would present their concerns, the issues, the problems, I was not necessarily holding space for them to have all of that, but want to solve it, want to fix it, want to soften it, want to rescue it, want to reassure, maybe explain it away. I'll take the responsibility for your emotions that never belonged to me in the first place. You guys, are you with me? There's got to be other people besides me that just fall into this too. And so the relationship might look peaceful on the surface, but the energy underneath is definitely super uneven. Because by helping so much, by trying to regulate so much, I would unintentionally interrupt their growth. I would prevent them from having the skills that they need in the workplace when I would show up and resolve tensions between other people for them by moving job assignments or finding a passive way to alleviate those points of conflict. They didn't develop the people skills. So then with the next assignment and the next group of people, there was yet another conflict with another person that they still didn't know how to resolve. And so as leaders, especially if we fall into wanting to be likable, um, or just wanting to have that peaceful, harmonious dynamic, you know, you can enable people without meaning to. And what can really happen is the emotional labor becomes imbalanced because while you are relating for other people and trying to regulate, you're doing a lot of work and they're not. And that becomes very imbalanced. And what can happen with it for you, possibly, is resentment to follow. And you're being the bigger person. And when you're always being the bigger person, eventually you get tired of being the bigger person, and that feels like an injustice. So, what really happens here in the end when you are relating for people rather than to people, and I hope that you understand what I'm saying there, is really it comes down to regulating preemptively someone else's emotions around a conflict.
Mm-hmm.
You don't have mutuality where both people are stabilizing the dynamic, which is going to create this person always wanting or putting the onus on you to make things okay for them time and time and time again. And that, especially if you're a leader, not just in the workplace with colleagues, that can get exhausting even just with your colleagues. But if you're a leader and you use this dynamic to lead a team and you have a team full of people who constantly come to you because you've set the stage in this manner, you are going to get burned out real quick. And you are going to be exhausted day in and day out from an emotional standpoint. I know you feelers who are listening to this, you're probably nodding your heads, maybe even laughing a little bit because you're like, oh my gosh, it's all so true. I wish I didn't know from experience, but it's very real, very real. So here your power move is to draw back. And when people are talking to you about the conflict that they're having, affirm their experience of that, and then help them to formulate and seek solutions unless that's not an option. and create a solution-based conversation around resolving that conflict that keeps them in the driver's seat. They're the ones with the onus. They're the ones that have to have the follow through. They're the ones showing up. You're equally defining both of your roles. This is mine to resolve in the situation. This is yours to resolve in the situation. And being very intentional to have both people being players in those scenarios and the outcome of the scenario. I see a smirk, SJ, and I'm so curious what's behind it.
Well, I'm just hoping that the non-feelers are paying attention to the flip side of that conversation, that this is how other people experience us. While we don't have those same items come up, there's crossing, right? Like the rescuer, the savior, the do all the thing, all those silly roles that create codependency on teams. It's true for the non-feeler side of the house as well. We just do it differently, and we do it by minimizing, invalidating, and saying, I don't care like how you feel. I care about the outcome and the deliverable. I want my deliverable. And you'll hear that in non-feelers, I feel like too. They'll start using words like mine, me, I, my deliverable, not our deliverable. So being conscious around the community aspect and not over owning anything within the process, because we too feel, I don't know if it's resentment, but certainly anger and rage and disappointment around why can't my team just do the damn thing? Like we have talked about this, we have talked about it, we have shown how to do it, we have set the expectations very clearly multiple times, vocally, in writing, documented a 5 million page novel or novella, maybe not a novel, novella at this point, of how I want you to do this thing. But because I have minimized their experience, I have invalidated their experience of the level of hard or heavy that this delivery is or will always be, they still aren't able to find firm footing where they can be truthful with me on what is happening because I have told them my intent, which is I don't care how you feel. I only care about the deliverable, which has not only invalidated them, but it has inhumanized me as an unreachable resource to where they can say, like, I'm not okay. I understand the deliverable. I get it. I understand what you want. I understand what we're marching to. However, my emotional body cannot carry this weight and I need help. Like I've removed that truth pathway because I have overlooked or genuinely not cared about their emotional experience because my value system doesn't prioritize that at work. So I think, well, just because I can compartmentalize these things and energy heal them away at the end of the day and process my feelings on my own time without needing to tell anybody or have that outlet. Or Janessa is often graced with my need for word vomit outlet of my day so that I can process that way. So
My
just
favorite,
because
absolute favorite. Let's go.
we create 10 syllable curse words over here sometimes because of the dramatic effect needed within that. But oftentimes I feel disrespected in my leadership because I have chosen to not make my team carry my emotional load and my feelings because I have a separate processing unit to where I find myself often invalidating them because I feel used. I feel like they are don't care about me. They don't care about how hard this project was for me either, because why do I have to process your crap with you when I don't do that to you? But it has nothing to do with that if I look at the true intent. They are still just as mission focused and delivery focused as me. But in order for them to get their heart and their gut and their mind right at the end, they need to tell me how they feel so that they can process and move forward and truly I have to show up and validate that experience and those feelings and I have to be willing to do something I don't want to do, which is actually give a shit about what they're saying. Like I have to prep myself for that. So also having the hey, the honest conversation of as a leader, like wherever you identify, I think this Janessa has set this up beautifully of feelers, and I have labeled the rest of us non-feelers, which we all feel, by the way, we just don't like to admit it. But that's what we're going with today. She has set this paradigm up really well to where being really honest which side of that house you fall on. Like if you don't know your Enneagram style, that's okay. Come into Stronger together and we can figure that out for you. But you can definitely identify with the am I a feeler or am I a non-feeler, which will give you a little bit of an understanding outside of the Enneagram of how you process things and how you can better meet people where they truly are. But looking at that and being really honest with not just your intent, but who you are. So, like, there are some people on my team that are beautiful feelers. And I say, I am really bad at this portion of the feeling game. But because I value you, I have 12 minutes and I'm going to be fully invested with validating, hearing, listening, feeling all of your feelings about this specific project, this specific thing that happened. I'm going to invest that. And when I show up like that, of like, now I have to put a timer because some people can go on for hours lamenting, and I don't have the capacity to hold that level. So I want to be honest about my capacity as well. And sometimes at the end of that 12 minutes, we have not fully processed everything that they need to, and I know that. And I say, I can show up for more of this tomorrow if needed. But today, I hear you, and I'm invested in trying to solve that problem with you, but being very honest about who you are and what you really have the capacity to do, because some days I don't have that capacity. So when Joseph says, I want to talk about how this like made me feel, I'm honest with him on those days. And I just say, I just don't have it in me today. I care about you. I want to hear this and I will show up for you tomorrow, but I can't do it today. I'm not going to show up as the best version of me in this moment. And I hope you understand. You feel me?
Sort of. I really feel like what we're talking about here is the dynamic of in conflict, you're focused on relationship or outcome. You might not know it, you might not realize it, and that might be the subconscious or the unseen parallel of what is most important. But in SJ's example, you heard her talking about the outcome. She's outcome focused. As a thinker, it's having the task, the problem at hand resolved. And for me, I don't know that this is for all feelers and non-feelers. This is a check-in for where you fall when you're in conflict. For me, I'm very relationship focused. But then this will also drive how you show up in that conflict. If you avoid, where you just kind of want it to go away and it doesn't really seem like it's worth it to engage, so you don't, but then everybody loses. Really, that's what happens when you avoid something entirely. Or maybe you accommodate. That's also relationship driven because you want the relationship to work. And so you will compromise. You'll lose so the other person can win, so the connection still remains. And then when you're more centered in relationship and outcome simultaneously, your approach might look like collaboration. I win, you win, let's figure it out so everybody wins. And then as you move to being super focused on outcome, it might look like I'm just going to tell you what's up, and then that's how that's going to be. Let's go do the thing. Right? So there's this whole spectrum from relationship and outcome blended to just outcome focused. And depending upon what you value the most in that conflict or what the other person values the most in the conflict, you're going to see how they show up with all of these other elements about ourselves, our personality, our past experiences, our identity, also playing a role in that. And it is so easy to see how conflicts get so messy so quickly because especially if you have one person who's wanting to resolve the conflict for relationship and you have another person who is wanting to resolve the conflict for the outcome,
Mm-hmm.
that it's not going to be a comfy, cozy, harmonious exchange. And there's going to be such a level of misalignment between those two because unless they're both calling to light, specifically their priority, you're going to be working at resolving two different elements with only one participant, even though both people feel like, hey, I'm coming to this conflict to resolve it.
Mm-hmm.
And they think they're both showing up to be equal players, but they're playing a slightly different game within the conflict. And
Mm-hmm.
this is the thing that I really love we've been diving into in the Stronger Together community so far this year is all of the little nuances. Like life is not, I'm a black and white person. Man, I love me some black and white. Like let's just have some clearly defined anything in life, and that is amazing. But we've been talking about all of the nuances of the spiritual laws, of the law of oneness, which I love that conflict came up. SJ was brilliant in bringing that and posing the question to the group of if we're all connected and we're all one, what role does conflict play then? Because we have all of these nuances within the human experience. And if we don't intentionally show up for them, then we can really experience a lot of things in life that aren't so comfortable to experience and not truly understand why because our intentions are so pure.
Yeah, do you feel like inauthenticity gets lost or felt like it's inauthentic when we're prioritizing the relationship on one side and then prioritizing the outcome on the other? Do you feel like that codes as inauthentic between those two parties?
I think it would really depend upon the person involved. I
Hmm.
mean, I feel like that can happen or has happened in the past between you and I, even how we approach um, me being relationship, you being more outcome driven. Yet I don't ever feel like it's been inauthentic because I do know you so well. I know that you're
Hmm.
being true to you. I know I'm being true to me. And we just look at things so much differently. But that's the advantage of getting to know
Right.
someone so intimately, so detailed, versus in leadership roles, sometimes you don't have the opportunity to get to know people on that level, or sometimes you want to get to know them on that level, but they have walls up and they're never going to actually let them down far enough that you're kind of left to make some educated guesstimates to try to move things forward. But I think there is room to say that, yeah, likely for other people who don't know people, beyond surface level in more casual work environment exchanges. I think there's a lot of times there's conversations about, oh, that person's so two-faced or this or that, where the
Hmm.
authenticity does become lost because there isn't the psychology side of it to understand what's going on behind the scenes. And then judgments are made or impressions are labeled accordingly. Yeah. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think so. I think when often at not with you, I've never noticed inauthenticity with you, but I think again it's the intent we hold, right? So go back to like my first point of intent, I think is often the thing that we just bypass. But yeah, absolutely. Like at work when somebody certain people have told me that they want the same outcome as me, they want to meet the deliverable timeline, they want to deliver a high quality product that obviously since you've brought this to light about relationship focused, that's where they lived in the prioritizing of their relationship with me, whereas I was prioritizing delivery. So when they didn't meet the timeline or the deliverable, or they didn't produce what they said that they were committed to doing, I felt like, yeah, this person lied to me. They don't actually care. They don't care about this project. They don't care about doing the right thing. They don't care. You can hear my stress point, right? Did you hear my Enneagram one? Like, I'm stressed out. Now I'm a terrible Enneagram one in this moment of how dare they lie to me and do the wrong thing. So, yeah, I would say for me, I definitely have coded that as inauthenticity or being lied to. When now, as I'm sitting here processing and thinking about the point you brought up, it wasn't a lie. They were just prioritizing the relationship. And they probably in that moment did, in fact, think that they could do what they said they were going to do. Maybe it just lacked follow through, or they didn't have all of the information available to them to really make that commitment to me. But because they prioritized the relationship rather than really prioritizing the can I deliver this outcome, it felt super inauthentic to me. And I definitely categorized that as someone who lies, someone who can't meet delivery timelines, and someone that I can't rely upon because of all of those things. Now, maybe I can't rely upon that person for delivery dates, but I can rely upon them to want to make it work and also for their ability to see all sides of the team members and prioritize those relationships. So while maybe I want a little bit more info, if I grant them the grace of more time before we have this conversation of can you make the deliverable that I'm asking you to make going forward, rather than pressuring them to answer me on the spot when that is not their default programming. Like they're not built for that, like on the spot game, right? Like they're just not. And that's
Nope, hard pass.
okay. And that's okay, right? Because it's not something that we all have superpowers that we're innately good at. And then the flip side of that, we're not so great at certain things. So, had I granted in this moment, I'm literally processing what she just said of if I would have given them more time to give me an answer, I would have gotten a answer that felt authentic to me because they would have had time to really process how they felt about the deliverable and then for them to really think about is this a reasonable item to do or do I need to ask for more time? Because I say that to them all the time too. If you needed more time, why didn't you ask for more time? You didn't ask for more time 2 weeks ago, but you're asking for more time on the day of the delivery. That I have a problem with. Because like I'm really good at pivot and like come up with shit on the fly, but the day of, that one's hard for me to not label that individual as somebody I can't rely on. So good food for thought for me too, that they're just prioritizing the relationship first. And the way to correct that is for me to give them more time and space so that I can get the authentic answer that's going to code as reality for me.
Yeah, that's important. It's important to have that trust. If you don't have that trust, it's hard to believe in positive intent, to go back to that point, which is brilliant. There is one thing moving forward before we get to the top of the hour that I do want to get to, and that is what happens on the other side of the coin when you
Okay.
stop overextending or, when you get burned out from overextending. To be quite honest, if overextending is your go-to way of showing up in conflict, then usually you do that until it doesn't work anymore or you're sick and dog tired of doing it. And of course, as all things, there's two extremes to every spectrum. So what do? You withdraw and you start creating distance. And while it might look like boundaries on the outside, internally, you're still going to be in conflict. And now you're going to be in the conflict alone. And once your energy turns inward, a few of the things that I said at the top of the show, that analyzing, the rehearsing, the judging, the predicting, the rant in your head. Maybe you're writing a TED talk for the person that you're never going to deliver. No energy is saved here at all. It's just privately spent, and it becomes a private experience that you're likely telling yourself you're doing so that you can recover, rejuvenate. But that doesn't often happen unless you do so very intentionally, very strategically, and with some tools to ensure that you are shifting your inner world. So when you reemerge from the withdrawal, you have something very strategic and productive to do in the situation. But it is important to know that silence can still be engagement. We talk about that a lot here, that the leaders, the strongest leaders, are often they're slower, they're not necessarily always talking, but they're actually listening quite a little. And that a healthy amount of distance can manage unpredictability. So, when chosen with strategy, that can also be a positive thing in the workplace. But sometimes I don't have the capacity actually means that I don't trust what will happen if I take action. And so, as we talk about positive intent and that trust that can be built between two people within the conflict, it's also really important to assess your trust in yourself in the situation as well. And especially if you're withdrawing, that's a really good time to check in on what your level of trust is with you and resolving the situation or who you need to be to show up in the situation in order to find that place of resolve. Because at the end of the day, the avoidance keeps relationships frozen in an old version of each other. And when it is work related, then typically a lot of that project will stay frozen as well. And then when you are outcome driven, if the relationship is frozen, your outcome usually gets frozen also. So sometimes being very outcome, I'm a doer, I like to take action and achieve. It's interesting to see that in conflict, relationship is a higher priority for me than the outcome, usually, not always. It's just interesting to see the dynamic of all of that play out. And sometimes if you're too focused on outcome and there isn't nurturing happening with the relationship, and you think if you just push harder on the deliverables, on the things that need to get done, this is so simple, just do the thing, the outcome just stays frozen because the relationship is frozen. So you can't ignore that dynamic within a conflict and get the result that you need and or want by either technique, by either overextending or by withdrawing. So there is a middle ground. There is a way to stay sovereign amongst the collective, so to speak, or to be centered, to be very present within yourself and a situation and be able to resolve it. And we talked all about that solution within the Stronger Together community. And as we're drawing near to the top of the hour, I am going to leave you guys in a cliffhanger with that because we don't have enough time to present it and to give you the details in a way that would really make you very successful in applying it in your day-to-day leadership conflicts that you may experience. So as we're moving here towards the top of the hour, before we reach our wrap up, SJ, I just want to make sure that I honor space and time for any other high point deliverables that you wanted to bring to this conversation today.
No, I think you definitely covered it. When you feel the conflict, it never started in that specific conversation. It always originated far before that conversation that is coding for you as conflict.
Yeah, and it's really about handling things cleanly. It is going to increase trust more than agreement between two people ever can. If you can be honest, but in a clean, centered way, you're going to earn the trust of someone else. And if someone else treats you with respect and shows up with a situation that needs resolved and can do so with a mutually respectful approach, that conflict, so to speak, is actually going to do a whole lot more for you, for them, for the relationship, for the workplace, for the project, for everything. And so it is so important how you show up in your leadership capacity, not just to be outcome driven and not just to be relationship driven either. So this is where you can see this dynamic of the invisible and the visible. The internal coherence becomes external safety. And when someone else feels safe, they're going to be more in their power and more likely to lean in with a resolution than to withdraw or to pull back or to continue to swim through the conflict or the discord that they're feeling internally because that safety has been rocked. So your internal coherence can really bring about a lot more resolve in a situation than telling people what you think they might want to hear to make the problem go away, or just giving brash truth without considering how someone can really hear and receive it, because that too can erode the safety for someone else. There's just a lot of dynamics to consider within. So, with that being said, let's recap what we've discussed here today. And there are many things hopefully you can take away from this conversation and this show. But most of all, please know that conflict doesn't damage connection. It's the unconscious reactions inside of conflict that do. And so the more conscious that you can stay within a conflict, the more likely it is that you will walk away, as we were just talking about, with it having done something more beneficial to the relationship or the dynamic than harmful. And just keep in mind that a lot of people aren't afraid of disagreeing or the disagreement, but they are afraid of what the disagreement might mean about their belonging, their safety, as we talked about, their respect, their being understood, those types of inner values that people really cling to. And because of that, we can start managing the moment instead of participating in it. So going back to relating for people rather than relating to them, and working to have an outcome rather than actively participating, listening, and being involved in that dynamic. So we don't want to overextend and carry what isn't ours. And we also don't want to completely withdraw out of protection. We want to stay able to both come from a safe place and to be in tune to the inner world and landscape, the emotions, the identity, all of the things that we talked about through this show that play in the background that lead people to show up in conflict the way that they do. And also know that your sensitivity, what you're picking up on, if you have that pit in the gut, in your gut, if you're, you know, goosebumps, or your hair stands up, or you get tense, your jaw tightens as someone's talking to you. Your sensitivity in this way, it's not actually an obstacle in the conflict, although in the moment it can feel like it, because sometimes as our body is going off that things are unsafe, giving us those signals, it can seem like a really big distraction and inconvenience when you're trying to present yourself as being calm and centered. But really, that sensitivity, it is actually your guidance system. So being in tune to whether you have that tightening in your chest, or you're getting an impulse and urge to fix, or you just want to shut down and pull out, maybe the irritation that something's feeling off, all of that's your guidance system to help you return to finding a logical solution. Because actually, if you tune into those sensations, and we've talked about this in other shows, they have a lot of wisdom for us, and they're showing up to help us. So we have to honor that our feelings move faster than the thought, and that we do need to and benefit from. I really don't like using the word need, but every once in a while it's prudent, and you can never go wrong by slowing down. You in a conflict, though, if the building's on fire and you decide that you're just gonna like crawl to the exit, we have a whole different scenario and conversation, but that's not what we're talking about here today. So in times of conflict, slowing down so that you can organize your thought, you can organize behavior, and then allow the words to show up that will convey your true message. And this allows you to stop relating for people, to stop leaving the moment. And then you will start having clarity arrive faster than what you ever thought it could. And that is where connection truly deepens. And it has nothing to do with whether people completely agree or not. But it's because everybody becomes safe to stand in their truth together. So leadership, it shows up in families and teams and business. And it isn't created by having the right script. This isn't about the right words to say. It's actually created by the person, by you, when you remain steady while truth is being revealed. Whatever that truth is, you know that you're fine, you're safe, and you can hold your center and be steady. And that's what working in the unseen, so that what plays out in the physical in the scene, does to reorganize the physical. And that's exactly what we practice inside Stronger Together. It's a space for people who already carry responsibility in their lives, whether that's work or family, in their communities, and they're ready for that leadership to feel less heavy and more natural to them. And it's also for those who want to do it by not doing more, but by becoming internally clearer, that authenticity that SJ was talking about. So when you understand how to stay located within yourself and be connected to others, your conversations get cleaner. Your decisions, they become easier. And relationships start requiring so much effort that it feels like you're the one doing the things to hold it all together. So you'll still take strategic action in the physical world, but it's no longer guided by force. If today's episode felt like not so much information and more like a recognition of your true self, you'll absolutely feel at home and stronger together. You can learn more by visiting www.strongertogether.com. And until next time, keep your eyes wide open, especially to what's happening before words are spoken.
And I just want to clarify, it's www.strongertogetherinstitute.com.
Institute. Dang it. Thanks for the
Yeah.
clarification and
Yeah,
keeping
I'm like, they're
my
never
eyes wide
gonna
open.
find us. Janessa shall keep her eyes wide open, and you all will find us at www.strongertogetherinstitute.com.
And we'll, of course, have that in the show notes. We'll see you next time.
Yes.